So now I'm going to move on to introducing our speaker, Steve Sharpe. Steve is a senior attorney at the National Consumer Law Center, where he focuses on foreclosures and mortgage lending. He leads NCLC's federal mortgage servicing policy work and frequently presents on mortgage servicing and other housing issues. So Steve is an important voice in foreclosure policy, and he's a popular panelist on our webinar. In fact, Steve was on our webinar earlier this year, back in April. So we're so happy that he's back again to talk more about the VASP program and also the updates to the FHA Payment Supplement option. And one more thing I wanted to remind everyone is that if you have questions for Steve, please put them down in the Q&A box rather than the chat. We don't want to miss your questions. And as the presentation goes on, the chat keeps scrolling, so you don't want to miss those, all right? And if you run out of time today and we don't get your questions answered, Steve's email is going to be also listed in the presentation, and you can send your questions over to Steve and he can answer them for you. All right, Steve, so now I'm going to pass it over to you. Take it away.
Thank you very much. All right, I'm going to share my screen. 1 second. Share. I can start. Hi, everyone. It's great to join you again. I always love talking to this group. And I always love talking about the new developments we have. This is about future planning, the things that are coming online to make your job hopefully a little easier and your clients' lives a little better by having some we're really excited about 2 really interesting updates that we think are going to provide a lot of relief for folks. And again, I thank you for all you do. You all are really crucial in helping people avoid foreclosure. This is a complicated, challenging space, and without you, there would be a lot more homes lost. So thank you for what you do. You can always email me. My email is right there. A lot of you do, and I always appreciate it. I really enjoy talking to you about your cases and about what's coming on, because it's going to be challenging. This is not going to be a particularly fun presentation, especially toward the end. We're going to dive in to some depth on the VA update. We're going to flag something that we'll probably talk about in the future when it comes to changes to the Flex mod. And then we're going to get really in the weeds on the upcoming FHA Payment Supplement. We talked about Payment Supplement last time. It is a very exciting concept. It is a very new concept, and unfortunately, it is very complicated. And what you'll see by the end is it is worth getting through all the challenges of it, because the result is so much better than what a lot of our clients are seeing right now. So be patient with me. It will be worth walking through. I promise. We do have the Q&A open. I will stay for Q&A for some of these things that may become a little complicated. Even experienced folks doing this have a little trouble kind of wrapping their mind around the payment supplement. So it's not coming on until the beginning of next year, so we have plenty of time, but I do think it is important to jump in. So that's what we're going to cover today. Before I do that, I want to flag one really important thing. In addition, as I think many of you know, there is a proposed rule to change the process for applying for foreclosure relief. This is the CFPB's rule on Reg X. It's a really big update to how things will be done. And it is at the proposal stage, and we at NCLC are going to comment. I know folks at NHRC are working on this as well. A crucial thing that we need from you all as we plan to comment is the ability to capture your feelings on it, your work on the ground, what has been working, what are challenges, what can you bring from your experience to bear on this rulemaking. So as a result of that, we have created 2 surveys at NCLC for advocates and housing counselors. And I would really strongly encourage you to fill those out. Take about 10 minutes for each of them. I think they'll be posted in the chat, and if not, I will post them when I have a chance. The first is a survey about Regulation X generally. So just general what have been your experiences in helping people avoid foreclosure? What has worked? What has caused problems? You'll see, you can answer from your experience. The second survey is also really important. It is about your experience serving borrowers with limited English proficiency, LEP borrowers. We are calling that out specifically because the new proposal adds a lot of exciting new language to govern and address what servicers need to do to help borrowers with limited English proficiency. And we need your input as to what has worked, what has your experience been. So please, we would urge you to fill out both surveys. It will help us in our process. We will share the results with the Bureau, and we think it's really critical in order to make sure that your voices are heard. There will be chances in both surveys to also add some general comment. If you have, if we don't ask a question that you want to answer, you'll have a space to do that. So please fill out those surveys. Okay. Again, thank you for that. Let's dive in. The plan is to go a little more in depth with VASP. We talked about VASP, the VA servicing purchase, last time. We're going to spend a little more time with it. We're going to touch on Fannie and Freddie, and then we're going to really dive in to FHA Payment Supplement. Please ask questions as we come, and we'll go from here. Okay, you've heard this, but I'm going to keep saying, I know you all are tired of hearing me say this, but it is the real crucial thing that we always have to start out with. And maybe we have new people on who have not heard me say this. Patience for those who already have. The first thing you should do when you have a borrower in front of you and you're trying to help them identify what options are available is to identify the relevant investor or owner. In other words, who is calling the shots? We do not have a uniform system for helping borrowers when they fall behind. In fact, you're going to see how very different they are in a few minutes. The rules that apply matter so much. So you need to know, is it a Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac loan, FHA loan, VA loan, or USDA loan? What apply? Do none of these rules apply? And are we in that space where folks are just in private label securities where it's very hard to know what applies? The key is to know that up front. Fannie and Freddie have a loan lookup. FHA, you can usually tell from the documents. VA, you can tell from the documents. USDA guaranteed is a little harder. We have some information on this. We've covered this. You can always reach out to me if you have any questions on how to do it, but you have to know up front, in addition to getting all of that valuable information you're going to get about the borrower situation, you have to know what rules apply in order to be able to truly help people. And so we're going to talk about, at first, something that only applies to VA loans, briefly something that only applies to Fannie and Freddie loans, and then we're going to end with something that only applies to FHA loans. So it's really crucial to know what the investor is. If you have any trouble with that, let me know. I can help you figure that out in a particular case. Okay, let's start with VA. And this bears repeating just because it's been so bad. The increase in interest rates, people talk about this as affecting housing prices and borrowing and lending, but really it has had a sharp impact also on the options available when borrowers fall behind, especially in federally insured or federally guaranteed space, in that VA, USDA, and FHA space. The interest rate generally, though it's a little complicated, would generally be, when a loan is modified, it's generally changed to the market rate. And when the market rate is so much higher than the rate that borrowers had when they started making payments, it really can cause trouble. And so, in the VA space has been even amplified by the fact that you have rates going up, and then we had no partial claim program, a program where you can take part of the amount owed or the amount owed and put it at the end of the loan at 0% interest. VA hasn't had that. And as a result, it has been a really terrible situation for our veteran borrowers. NPR has talked about this. we've talked about it. It's been very challenging for at least around 18 months, if not longer. So that's why we have a pause. And so just a reminder, we have a pause. Now, how it's been used and whether it's been followed is hard to know. I think generally it's been followed, but it started out as a pause through May 31st. The details were in the circular. And why we had a pause is that there was a recognition that there were no really clear options available that were reasonable and that consistently provided help to borrowers. And so in the middle of the pause, sort of where we've been, VA released its VA servicing purchase program. So we had all the trouble, we had the foreclosure pause, and then on April 10th, we have the VA servicing purchase. This is really crucial language in their press release. It says it begins May 31st. So there may have been some borrowers who could be given this VA servicing purchase. And it says veterans will not directly apply for VASP, but this should be part of the conversations starting May 31st. However, this is kind of where we are going because we're getting very close to this now. While it could start on May 31st, servicers have until October 1st, 2024 to get familiar with the process and really start offering. So that is the first takeaway you should have here, is that there's the foreclosure pause. There are very bad options as a general matter for VA loans. It does options that just aren't helping consistently all the people we need to. They did release the VA servicing purchase. However, it is August 8th. I had to look. It is August 8th. So we are still almost 2 months, a little less than 2 months from the absolute start time for VA servicing purchase. That makes this very hard. I think right now, if you have a VA guaranteed borrower who's in bad shape, you really have to talk with them, see if their foreclosure pause is being honored, talk to the servicer about whether they have started VASP. I think we should hopefully get to the place where we are starting to ramp up getting near VASP because it is so crucial to have. So, but again, it is not guaranteed. As of right now, the mandatory effective date when servicers have to start offering it, October 1st, 2024. So it is getting very close.
And 1 second, Steve,
yes.
really quickly. We have a lot of people that's adding a lot of great questions to the chat.
Great.
But if you could add it to the Q&A instead, just so we don't miss out on all the questions we have to ask Steve.
Okay, we have a pause here. Is there any questions that would be helpful for me to get right now? Maybe not. Okay, we'll keep charging on. So, so we have a pause, and then we have VASP released, and then this is an update from the last time we talked. VA has extended the moratorium to December 31st, 2024. We urged this. I think a lot of other folks did too. A lot of other folks did too. That if it isn't going to be offered until October 1st, 2024, the foreclosure moratorium can't be done in May. So we now have an extension of the moratorium until December 31st, 2024. And you can see from the language, it is strongly encouraged servicers. So I would say, for the most part, my understanding is that servicers have been holding off. If you have a borrower where they aren't, I think talking to the servicer about the situation is really crucial. And this is a reminder, we've talked about this before, there is the VA tech that is assigned to every loan that has fallen behind. So there is someone at the VA who is assigned when a loan falls behind. It's called the VA technician. You can find out, your client probably got a letter saying who the relevant technician is. You know, with so much mail, I don't expect them to often have it, but you can Google VA technician home loan. There's a 1-800 number, and you can call that number if you need to have both a technician and help the situation. So for right now, we are still waiting on VASP to come totally online, but we do have, this is the update and extension of the targeted foreclosure moratorium until December 31st, 2024, something that's really crucial to keep in mind as we are continuing to help our veteran borrowers. So what does a targeted moratorium mean? Well, this is different from the last language, and VA explained what they mean by targeted moratorium in the circular. Here's their first pass. Basically, they're saying, you know, there are some exceptions to the moratorium. The first is not that surprising, probably not people who you are generally helping. The servicers are allowed to proceed with vacant and abandoned foreclosure. Second, if the servicer has documented the borrower's desire to neither retain home ownership or avoid foreclosure, they can proceed on that. The third one is a real problem about unresponsive borrowers, servicers who haven't received communication from the borrower. Put a pin on that one. We thought that that was really not an appropriate reason to lift a moratorium, because some borrowers are just extremely confused about the situation. They've been dealing with this with years, potentially, where they just don't know what's available. So we thought this was a particularly bad one to lift. The third one, or the fourth one, I should say, is really important, and one where I really think housing counseling is key. If they're saying, well, we don't think this person could be eligible for VASP, we don't think there's anything that will work, so we're lifting the moratorium. That's where, given how new this program is, given how much the guidance has changed, given what we're going to talk about, I would look very skeptically on any claims that the servicer has evaluated the borrower and that no option, including VASP, is out there. So that last one, I think that's a real crucial place that you can play, especially if you're getting in the middle of a conversation that had already started. So that's what we mean by targeted. These are some exceptions. We think that third one is really bad. And lo and behold, last month, or I guess it's the middle of June, a month and a half ago, VA lifted this third option C. They said, no, that is no longer part. So we really do have the vacant and abandoned, the borrower doesn't want any help, and then this third one, which wouldn't be eligible for VASP anyway, which again, I think should be scrutinized very carefully. So that's where we are in the process. We are waiting on VASP to come fully online, coming very soon, and we still have this moratorium in place. So then let's move into what we expect VASP to look like. And this is just as a general matter. VA has guidance here. They put the specific guidance for VASP in Chapter 9 of their handbook. They have recently posted some frequently asked questions that we think are going to be helpful. These are the places where you would go to find out in granular detail and specific detail what is involved with VASP. And they also, and this is really important too, have released a revised waterfall. So how they see the VA options all holding together is now in Appendix F. So if you take nothing else from this presentation, you at least know now precisely where to go to find out what the details are of VASP for yourself. But of course, we're going to talk about them now. The first thing to know is that VASP is last, okay? They are putting that option at the very end of the waterfall, meaning the servicer is going to first evaluate for all other loss mitigation options first to see if they make more sense than the VA purchase. And this can include a repayment plan, and it can include a few loss mitigation options, including one that extends the loan to 30 years. So you check these: repayment plan, if it's affordable. These other options, the last two are wondering if you can get to a 10% reduction in principal and interest. Here's the thing: these other options have been are a lot like what's in place now, with maybe some slight difference. But the point being, with the rise in interest rates and the fact that people need payment relief, the repayment plan and the other loan modification options are really just not cutting it. Now, you'll see them if you look at Appendix F. The servicer may walk you through with them, but they are relying on tools that the VA has already had, and these have been tools that simply have not been able to provide payment relief and often even get the borrower back to the place where they were before they fell behind. You know, they're not generating a payment that's like what the payment they had before. So frankly, even though VASP is last, and you should be aware that the servicer is going to review for these other modification offers, I mean, they haven't proven thus far to be very successful in generating relief. But they are there, so you do need to know that that's what the servicer is going to do under the waterfall. So what does VASP mean? What does it do? It is a truly different program than what other options VA has set out before, but it's not going to look that different from the borrower's experience than modification programs we've had in the past. The modification is going to be relatively simple. It is going to capitalize the arrears. It's going to reduce the interest rate to a fixed 2.5% rate. And then it's either going to extend the term to a 30 or 40-year term. And we'll talk in a second about how that difference will play out. So that's what it's going to look like. What's really different and what could cause some challenges, and why this is taking a while, and why we all really need to be engaged in this process, and why this may be harder than you think, is that the VA is going to be purchasing these loans and putting them on their books. They're not going to service, but then the servicing is going to be transferred. Why that's important is that the reason we have these modification increases and these interest rate increases is that these were staying in the private market. They were being repooled back into Ginnie Mae securities, which made it so like there was this interest rate pressure to have it be more like the market. So here, VA is using their balance sheet to take these loans and put the interest rate at a below market rate. That's really the import of this, that it's going to be a below market interest rate. And that's why it's going to provide a crucial, why it's going to fill a crucial gap, because the other programs, based on what the economics have looked like, just haven't been able to provide payment relief. This is going to hopefully provide payment relief by providing a below market rate. But from a what are the modification terms standpoint, it's actually not going to be, we don't think, I should say, knock on wood, it shouldn't look that much different than what a standard loan modification looks like. It's just that the rate is going to be lower. Now, we aren't fully online yet, so we don't totally know what this is going to look like, but just from a conceptual perspective, this shouldn't be that much different than what we've seen before. So 2.5% interest rate, either a 30 or 40-year term. The real key is that VA is going to be purchased. It's the VA servicing purchase. They're going to purchase the loans. There will be a transfer of servicing, and that's where it could get more complicated. So how do you decide if it's a 30 or 40-year term? It depends on a payment target. So if for VASP, we have a 20% payment target. Now, recall when we've talked about modifications programs before, a payment target does not mean you are getting a 20% reduction. A target is just that. It is a target. Some people are going to get less than 20% just based on what their loan terms are. Some people may get more, but the target is just that. Sometimes you hit the target, sometimes you miss, sometimes it's a little off. So 20% is what the principle is, but it's not guaranteed. You can't tell your clients you're going to get a 20% reduction in interest rate just off the cuff. You need to know a little bit more about the loan. And what it's really going to determine is whether you're going to have a 30-year extension or a 40-year extension. If you don't hit, just to think about it simply, if you don't hit a 20% target with a 30-year term, we're going to go out to a 40-year term. That's where the payment target is going to matter. But again, let's not get too hung up on saying that's going to be it, because what the specific relief is going to be truly going to be dependent on the borrower's individual situation. So we have guidance in the handbook that are going to provide some more of the eligibility stuff. These things are really better tested once the program is up and running. It's hard to know exactly where things are going to go sideways until we actually see the plan in place. We do know a few things. It's only for owner-occupant borrowers. It is for people who are between 3 months and 60 months delinquent as the date they submit. So, that 60 is probably where it's going to be tricky. Hopefully, for the most part, people aren't quite that far behind. But, it's going to be, we have heard from the VA, it is supposed to be out October 1st. You should start asking your servicers if it is out. Do we know exactly how this triage is going to work? Because we haven't had a modification program for so long in VA that's truly consistently provided relief. No. So I do think, if you're starting to see those people who are hitting the back end of that, I would start right now reaching out to VA Tech. I would start talking to the servicer about it now, because you got to watch that outer eligibility space. Handbook also talks about the stuff that handbooks often talk about: divorce, lien status. Again, we haven't seen how that has played out yet, so I'm just I'll point you to where it is in the handbook, but we don't know exactly what that's going to look like quite yet. The last kind of important thing about VASP is some situations will require a trial plan before the modification actually goes in place. And we've kind of moved away from trial plans in a lot of spaces, but we do expect a little bit of trial plan coming up. So the trial plans are going to hit if the loan is 24 months or more behind, or if the modification would result in a 20% payment reduction target. So in those cases, the borrower will have to fill a trial plan. We've all dealt with trial plans before. Hopefully these will go smoothly. Again, it's a little hard to know. And frankly, we still think there could be more guidance out here. We may get further clarity. We at NCLC have been talking to VA. A lot of folks in the industry have. There's been a lot of questions. You saw earlier that there were frequently asked questions that were just issued last week, I think 2 weeks ago. So there's still a lot of space here for change. I don't expect before October 1st that a lot of the really big aspects will change, but just keep, I'm trying to, and I know NHRC is trying to keep you all informed as things come through. We will keep doing that. But, there are some things that are subject to change here. And please email me again, like I said, if you have questions about how VASP is going to work. It is coming really close, and we're hoping that it's going to save a whole heck of a lot of people. We're hoping that it really provides an important, fills an important gap that is sorely needed for veteran borrowers. But again, the rubber is going to meet the road very soon, and you all are going to play a crucial role, as you always do, in figuring out with us all how this is actually working on the ground. So I think that's all for VA. I might take some of these questions. I'll just run through a few of them. So the first one is it a loss mitigation option? It is a loss mitigation option. It is, the word purchase does make that a little challenging, but what that really means is that purchase means VA is going to purchase the loan. Like I said before, the modification terms are going to be a little different, but the modification terms are going to be different than what is before, somewhat similar to what we've seen in other contexts, but the real difference is going to be that the VA is purchasing it. Question about if we are asked to complete a full workout package for VASP, should we decline to do it? My understanding is that VASP should be streamlined, meaning there shouldn't need to be relief. What I would do now is really push back. I would first identify to the servicer, so do you have VASP up and running? And then I would say, talk to them about your understanding that if you look at it, there's nothing in the guidance that says the borrower has to apply. This could also be a really good place to get the VA servicing tech in early. So I would suggest to do that. If you have trouble with any of that, let me know. So I would push back and talk, but I would kind of want to have the servicer confirm that VASP is even on the table, and then maybe work with the VA tech about how to do that. Okay. If the servicer has offered, some of these are kind of in the same boat. What do you do if the borrower is being offered nothing or is being offered a really bad loan modification right now? I would really, sit down with your client. Your client is going to be very risk averse on this, but I would really want to explore with the servicer very carefully and maybe even escalate it up a level at the servicer. Like, when is VASP going to get in? Like, either you're offering me nothing or you're offering me something horrible. When is VASP going to get in? Get the VA tech in, start getting, bringing more people into the conversation, start pushing these questions about VASP. If there's no offer or a truly horrible offer, all of this is going to be it's a very challenging time right now. There's no clear answer. A lot of this is going to depend on your client's own risk aversion, but I do think starting those conversations are really key. There is no targeted DTI for VASP. That's another question. It is more, there is a target payment reduction. The 20% is a target payment reduction, and that should be what really governs it. We're not doing gather your income and based a mod based on their, like 31% of their income. This is a targeted payment modification reduction, meaning it's the payment reduction that matters, not the relation so much to the income. Okay, I think we have covered a lot of those. There is a question, will the VA only use certain servicers? The VA is going to purchase the loans, and then they are going to determine who, through their contract, they're going to assign servicer, because they are, and this is again the big difference, the real key thing to this, they are the ones bringing the loans onto their books. And then the last question I'm going to get, we can do some more of these, but I do want to move on just to make sure we have enough time. Is this for VA? Is this for veteran borrowers or for just VA loans? It's really just for VA loans. It's the VA loan part that matters. So if it's a veteran borrower with an FHA insured loan or a Fannie or Freddie loan, this stuff doesn't apply. This only applies for VA guaranteed borrowers. Okay, so we're going to say a couple of these are answered live, and then we are going to move on. Thank you always for your excellent questions. Okay, so now we will move on to a quick note on Fannie and Freddie. We're going to probably have to do a whole nother portion, a whole nother thing on this. It is not coming online to December 1st, so we have some time. And it is not like what we're going to be talking about here in a few minutes, which is going to be like, hold on to your horses, we're going to be getting in there. But there are changes to the flex modification. For many of you, as you know, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac loans, their primary modification program now for the last, I think it's been 10 years now, the last quite a while, is the flex modification, which really provides very specific terms, provides a very, very specific set of rules for how you provide loan modifications. It had been set for a while. We and others have said that we didn't think the terms were generous enough. You were really limited on how much payment deferral you could have, forbearance principal you could have based on the loan's DTI. And Fannie and Freddie and FHFA actually took a lot of the suggestions that advocates had and they changed the flex. So this should provide more people with payment relief. So really on par should be better. It doesn't automatically kick all modifications terms out to 480 months. So that should be better. There is a description in this news release about how these changes are coming to come into play. It involves a lot of complicated waterfall adjustments. So it is probably worth a separate conversation here, but I did just want to flag that it is coming and that we probably should have a talk about it pretty soon before it comes into effect on December 1st. But just wanted to flag it's there. It was announced about 2 months ago, and it's a really good change. We do think it will help more people access modifications from Fannie and Freddie. Okay, now I'm gonna take a drink of water, and we're gonna talk about the payment supplement. Now, we have already talked about the payment supplement in our previous webinar. This is the truly new program that FHA has in place, starting what could be offered now. I have not heard of anyone offering it now, but starting on January 1st, 2025. It is unlike, so VASP at its core with its modification is not that different than the sort of loan modifications that you all are used to seeing. Payment supplement, way different. It is also trying to solve this issue of how do you provide payment relief in a high interest rate environment. And this is a creative way that FHA has done it. But I do want to go, I'm just going to go quickly over some of the stuff we covered before. I want to just quickly go through some of this stuff just so you understand the context and where this fits. So before the pandemic, we had FHA HAMP. FHA HAMP, gather up your documents, send them in. You either get a standalone partial claim, some type of modification, a modification that combines a partial claim and a loan modification. That was not used during COVID, during the pandemic. We had a whole new set of solutions during the pandemic from FHA. And what we have now is HUD saying all of the FHA HAMP options are suspended through April of 2025, except for one key set of borrowers. And all borrowers are going to be evaluated for COVID recovery options. So now we have one waterfall. We don't have FHA HAMP. And everyone, regardless of their hardship, you do not have to have a COVID hardship. Everyone is going to be evaluated for COVID recovery options. The idea here being that we know FHA is hard at work coming up with a permanent option or with a permanent waterfall. So But before they do that, we're going to have everyone be reviewed for COVID recovery option. So FHA HAMP is suspended, but that doesn't mean there are no options available for borrowers. It means all borrowers, even those without COVID options, are going to be evaluated for COVID options. So that is what we have, except one big glaring exception: successors in interest, non-borrowers who require title through exempted transfer. There is a long reason why this is. It would be way easier if this were the case, but those subset of folks, those people who acquire title through an exempt transfer, those successors in interest, they are still going to be reviewed for now through FHA HAMP. So for the most part, FHA HAMP suspended. COVID options are what we use for all borrowers, with a tiny exception that the successors in interest, they are still going to be evaluated for FHA HAMP. So you can't burn all your FHA HAMP material or throw those totally away. You still may need to use those for successors in interest. Okay, so that is the situation. Mortgagees, servicers review borrowers for COVID recovery options through April of 2025. You can have more than one of those options. In other words, if you had one 4 years ago, that doesn't make it so you can't have one now, though it can impact what you have available, as we will see. The key here, and I hear this is still not happening, and I would really stress folks to raise these issues with FHA National Servicing Center. You can Google FHA National Servicing Center. They're not like an appeal, but they can solve problems. What the COVID waterfall really should mean is streamlined loss mitigation reviews. It should be the servicer talks to the borrower about what the borrower can afford and then identifies the right option. Should not be a big documented process. I still hear this happening. It's still very frustrating. I would definitely urge you, if you are being faced with these unreasonable requests for FHA insured loans, again, we're talking about FHA insured loans, I would raise these issues with the National Servicing Center. Why are they asking me for all this stuff? We should just be in a conversation identifying what the proper option is. And for the most, and these are what our options are. And I know I've had quite a few emails saying, well, wait, are pre-foreclosure sales and deed in lieu sales, are those suspended because FHA HAMP is suspended? No, all of there are options like the stuff in FHA HAMP in the COVID recovery, including pre-foreclosure sale and deed in lieu. So the current waterfall that should apply for most borrowers, just not those successors in interest, for most borrowers, it's in the handbook at this section. These are the general options available now: your standalone partial claim, your recovery modification, then the pre-foreclosure sale, which is the short sale, or the deed in lieu. That's what we have now. But then we're going to add, and it is already in the handbook, payment supplement as our new home retention option that comes in after the recovery modification. So right now, we don't have it for the most part, but it is coming very soon. And just a reminder what those are, the ones that are in place now. So the recovery standalone partial claim is that the standalone partial claim is where you get the partial claim, which will become very important for this, which is that 0% interest loan from HUD, partial claim on insurance, the 0% interest loan from HUD that a borrower gets from HUD in order to bring the loan current. And with a standalone partial claim, you use that 0% interest loan from HUD. It brings the loan current. HUD pays the servicer. Now there's a loan between borrower and HUD at 0% interest due at the end of the loan. It is a standalone partial claim. It is there to bring the loan current and to resume the pre-hardship payment. We've had some version of this for a very long time. It's standalone because we're not modifying the loan terms, which is really crucial because those modifications are what's in such trouble right now. We use this to bring it current, but there has to be a limit on this. You can't just partial claim your entire loan. HUD says you can have a partial claim, but you can't, it is limited to 30% of the borrower's unpaid principal balance at the time of the first partial claim. We call that the 30% statutory maximum. Of course, that makes sense. You can't just defer the entire amount of the loan to the end. There's got to be some limit to it. The limit has been since for years now, 30% of the borrower's unpaid principal balance. Many borrowers have maxed out their partial claim. And for those borrowers, a lot of what I'm going to talk about later, unfortunately, isn't going to provide a lot of help. But most borrowers, a lot of borrowers haven't received that statutory max. They haven't had a partial claim that takes up all of their availability. So they will be helped by some of this stuff. So standalone partial claim, that's there right now. That's at the top of the waterfall. If the borrower can afford to just resume their payment and just needs to have the arrears covered and put at the end of their loan, it can be a very good option for people. The next option is the recovery modification, which has also been in place for a while. It is a target like the VASP target, just a target. Doesn't mean that's what you're going to get. It means that is our target of a 25% reduction, and it can combine the modification with a partial claim in order to really get more relief. The problem, the real problem, why we are going to move on and talk about payment supplement is that it's the same interest rate problem we talked about with VA. When borrowers are getting these modifications, even with having the ability to combine a partial claim to defer some of the unpaid balance, we're still seeing payment increases. Because if you're at a 2.5% interest rate and you're given a 7% modified rate, well, that's not a good way to reduce payments at all. It's in fact a very bad way to reduce payment, and that's the problem that we're dealing with. But that's what's in place right now. I think a lot of folks a lot of folks were, I think, smartly getting half to reinstate. As we know, half dollars have pretty well run dry. So now we are often talking about a standalone partial claim. So but it is that very problem of the modification that we have this payment supplement that we're going to talk about now. The problem is people often need payment relief. Of course they do. They've been through a financial hardship. They may not have recovered all the way, or they have recovered all the way, and there's lots of other stuff happening. Just bringing their payment current for those folks really simply isn't enough. And we know that. We know that from data. We know that from experience. We know that many borrowers are truly going to need something to help them out. And the modification just wasn't doing it because of rates. So that's where we have the establishment of the payment supplement. And again, it is coming online January 1st, 2025. They could be offering it now. I really haven't heard of many folks offering it because there's a lot for the servicers to do to get ready to offer this. So, and this is what we talked about. We're just seeing modification increase rates, and it has to do with the fact that the primary mortgage market survey is up. I haven't checked in the last couple of days, but it was hovering around 7%, which is so different than what people have on right now. You know, their current note rate is way lower. The interest rate increase is just so much more. So this is where this comes into play. And so there, you know, I think we want to think about this in layers. And maybe you got this the last time we talked about it, but probably some of you didn't because it's complicated. The first layer of understanding a payment supplement is just simply understanding what it's trying to do. It is trying to not modify the loan. For an FHA loan, when you modify it, that's when you're taking borrowers from their relatively lower rates into relatively higher rates. So a payment supplement is a tool that works particularly well right now. Now is the kind of time where the payment supplement is good because it does not involve modifying the loan. It builds on the standalone partial claim. Remember, the standalone partial claim is you get that 0% interest rate from HUD, or loan from HUD, and you use it to cure the amount that you owe without changing the term and without changing the interest rate. So that's what we're doing. But then HUD thought, what if we could use that resource and provide extra relief to help the borrower reduce their payment? So you take more of a partial claim, more of that 0% interest loan from HUD. Sure, that means you're going to owe more money to HUD, but it's at 0% interest and you don't pay it until the end of the loan. You don't make monthly payments on it. So what if we take more of that partial claim for borrowers who need it, and we supplement the borrower's payment with that extra partial claim for a period to give borrowers the chance to get fully back on track, or if rates change, to get a modified loan. That is the core of the payment supplement. We are taking extra partial claim to supplement payments, not forever, for a 3-year period. And then at the end of that 3-year period, it goes back to the principal and interest portion we had before. You can both see how this makes sense because we know modifications have been so fraught. It's a bad scene to modify because of this rate adjustment. So it makes sense to use this other resource to supplement, to give borrowers who need the payment relief a little more payment relief for a period of time. You can also see how this is different because you're not going to have the same payment at the start of your modified loan throughout. Now, this is different than those HAMP modifications for those of you who've been doing this for a while, where you have the stair step and it goes up over time. We're not really doing that. We're returning back to where the borrower started. We're bringing it after 3 years back to the payment they had before the hardship. But it is going to be an adjustment because it is not last forever. You can see, again, why your jobs are so crucial, why you provide such important guidance, because there is no way folks can truly understand this. I wouldn't say there's no way. I think it is going to be very challenging for people to understand this. And if they have a trusted housing counselor, someone who can walk them through it, it's going to go way better. But of course, that means you probably need to know a little bit about how this works even more. So we're going to get under the hood here on the payment supplement. And we're going to walk through an example, which will be both terrifying at parts because it is quite complicated, but you'll see actually how this works really well. So the first thing, the key number one thing, borrowers, in order to have extra partial claim, borrowers are going to have some available partial claim. So this only works for those folks who have not maxed out their partial claim and who have enough partial claim under that percent cap. So remember, we talked about you can't have infinite partial claim, wouldn't make any sense. So it's capped to 30% of the unpaid principal balance. So if your borrower has already had a modification or a partial claim or whatever that has capped that, this isn't going to help them. Just to be clear, this is not going to help everyone. This is only going to help those folks who have enough partial claim to make it work when we're talking about a system that gives extra partial claim. And it is going to increase the amount of the partial claim owed. That is true. But it is going to do, partial claim is a 0% loan that does not require monthly payments. So while it does work as a balloon, it isn't like these balloons that are designed to do that. You're really getting a benefit of 0% interest and then not having to make payments on it until the end. So you are going to need partial claim available. And yeah, it will certainly increase how much partial claim you're going to take out if you're going to do a payment supplement. So like we said before, the structure of it is actually not that tricky. You reinstate the loan. So you have enough partial claim where you get the amount, the arrears, and you reinstate it. But maybe you don't change the interest rate, you don't modify the remaining term, you go in with the same term. And in fact, you advance the term because with a partial claim is catching up on missed payments. And then you reduce how much the borrower has to pay for a 3-year period of time by taking additional partial claim and applying it or supplementing the borrower's monthly payment. What that means is the partial claim gets bigger and the borrower pays in less than the amount. And of course, if the borrower didn't need payment relief, they're not going to get this far anyway, because they could just do the reinstatement. This, again, just as a reminder, is for those borrowers who need payment relief. And this will be added at the end of that waterfall, the COVID waterfall we talked about, and then we fully expect HUD will incorporate it in whatever waterfall it comes after April 30th, 2025, which is when the FHA HAMP will go away, or when the waiver goes away. Okay, so it's at the end of the waterfall, so what does that mean? It means you're not going to get to a payment supplement if the previous step can result in a decent amount of payment relief. So the target for the recovery mod, like we said, is a 25% reduction in payment. That's what the recovery mod, which is the modification program above the payment supplement on the waterfall, that's what it aims to do. But as we know, it ain't doing that right now for most people. It's not hitting 25% for most people at all. It is for some, but very few because of rates. So this isn't saying it has to hit the target. If it doesn't hit the target, it goes. It's just saying you should get moved down to the payment supplement if the recovery mod can't hit 15% reduction. So it's a little less than the target, but still most recovery modifications in this rate environment are not getting to a 15% reduction. So if it does, you give the recovery mod and not the payment supplement. But if we are not hitting 15%, then you move to the payment supplement, which also has the 25% reduction, but it was going to try to get there in a much different way. So that's what it means to be at the end of the waterfall after of the retention waterfall after the recovery mod. Okay. Now we're going to start getting into some real tricky stuff with this. So we know what the target is on a payment supplement. We also have a minimum. You would call this like a don't bother with this amount of relief. And we have a new thing called the MOPR, our monthly principal reduction. We'll get into what the MOPR is in a bit, but that is the amount of relief. So basically, this will come into play for those people who have used some partial claim, but have not capped their partial claim. So what this is saying, if this payment supplement is only going to provide a little bit of relief, it's not worth the hassle. It's just not worth the hassle. It's too complicated. It's too much. So we have this 5% or $20 a month minimum. So in that case, the borrower would probably just do a standalone partial claim. It's like for those who have enough for the standalone partial claim and a little bit extra, if they can't hit a minimum amount, we're not, the servicer's not going to mess with it. Think about it that way. So you have to have enough to bring the loan current, but then you also have enough to be above the sort of, this doesn't make any sense to go through all of this work to provide a little bit of payment relief test. Think about it that way. So there is a minimum. So I know there are questions, but I think we're going to try to do an example. This is where it's going to get tricky. And again, we have this example. You will have this example in your slides. This is one example of how this is going to work. It is a little challenging, but I do think it will illustrate why you should care about this and why this is actually going to help folks a lot. Okay, we're going to walk through this. We're going to have a borrower comes in. Their interest rate when they come in the door is 4%. Totally situation that you're dealing with now. Interest rate way lower than the market interest rate of 7% or 7.5%. They come in, their monthly principal and interest payment is $952. They have an unpaid principal balance, so what's remaining owed on their loan, about $185,000. They've missed 12 months of payments. Importantly, what some portion of that, of course, would go to principal. Some portion of that would go to interest. So $11,000 total in missed P&I payments. We are separating that from escrow. When we talk here about payment reduction, and when we analyze this, we are talking about principal and interest portions of the loan here in this example. Not that escrow is not important. Lowered escrow is important, and it makes a bunch of challenge. But when we're talking about how the payment supplement works, we're talking about principal and interest payment. So we're also saying in this example, because we're not imagining something that wouldn't occur, there's of course going to be more money in fees and escrow advances owed, but we're putting that over to the side right now. So this is our borrower coming in 12 months behind, 4% interest, probably one that you all are seeing very, very often. This is a pretty standard, I think, example. So we're not in our example talking about income and expenses. That's key here. In our example, when we think about what the servicer needs to gather and we think about how to understand this, we're not included income and expenses. That's not how this thing is calculated. And we're not talking about monthly escrow like we said before. Of course, you need to practically advise your client and talk to them about their income and escrow. If they don't have any money, even a payment reduction isn't going to help them, unfortunately. So it's not that those things aren't relevant. They are, but they're not relevant for identifying how this would work in the waterfall. And as you can see, why would a servicer even need to collect income information anyway? It doesn't fit how we calculate what is available. So we're not talking about it except for just right now. And let's assume this person really needs monthly payment relief. They have made it clear. I don't care how complicated this is going to be. They simply cannot afford right now to reinstate their loan through a standalone partial claim. They need to be considered for other options. That's what they're coming in saying. So we know the standalone partial claim's out. They're saying, well, we'll say it's out for now in the current system, but we're saying we're going to move through. They're saying, oh, I can't afford to just do it. So the next thing we need to do is test what a loan modification would do. And so here we have to assume that the current rate, we're going to assume in this example that the current rate is 7.5%. So we know upfront that's going to be a problem. That's going to make this hard because we're moving from 4%, 7.5% or higher. This is going to limit the effectiveness of this modification. And unfortunately, this has been a really common situation. So I'm going to skip this part of the analysis. So you're just going to have to trust me here. But let's say then, under this situation, the best loan modification, again, change of terms, that this person can get involves an 8% interest because they need a 480-month term and the servicer can charge more than PMMS. So it's going to involve an 8% interest rate, double the rate, a 480-month term, way more added onto the loan, and a partial claim to address arrears and reduce principal balance of $55,000. That's the best mod offer under this analysis that they can get. So what does that do? It does make the principal balance go lower. So they had a loan that is $187,000 or $185,000, and you can check my math later, but I did it for you a little bit. We only had the missed interest because it all gets wrapped in, and then we take out the partial claim. So our principal balance is pretty low, but Lord, and you can do this by going on an amortization calculator. I have an amortization calculator I like. You can always email me if you don't have one. There are good ones online. But we know that principal at 8% interest and a 480-month term, the principal and interest payment is going to go up. This borrower with a loan modification using a pretty standard loan modification right now for HUD, they're getting a 30%, or sorry, it's not 30%. They're getting a $32 increase. They are getting an increase in their principal and interest payment from a modification, even though they have all the partial claim. They haven't used any partial claim. Still, because of this rate environment, they're getting an increase of $32. Side note, important side note. Remember, the payment supplement doesn't come on until January 1st. And I'll give you a little spoiler. The payment supplement is going to be something way better for these people. And we're going to see how. It's going to be way better. But the payment supplement isn't on right now, and it's not going to be on for a while. So what would you actually do with this borrower right now? You would really have to talk with them about, I know you said you can't afford your current payment, but the standalone partial claim here is actually going to provide you more relief because it's going to get you back at least to your old payment. So I know you said you needed payment relief, and you probably really do because I believe you, but I'm unfortunately here to tell you the best modification offer is only getting you $34 in an increased payment. I think we have to reconsider the standalone partial claim, which really stinks, but that is the situation we're in now, and why you can see we need something. It is true that HUD needed to do something, because this isn't a crazy situation. This is clients who walk through your door every day and about what this is, and they're getting bad deals. So let's see what the payment supplement can do. So we are going to bring in another bit of complication, and we're going to bring in the MOPR. What a great acronym. A new favorite acronym for all of us to have. The monthly principal reduction, the MOPR. It is what the supplement is. Why is it principal reduction? Well, for boring technical reasons, when you supplement someone's payment with a partial claim, you can't supplement the interest side. You only supplement the principal side. Why that is, it is not worth getting into today. So when we talk about the payment supplement and this 25% target, we actually need to make sure, and you'll see where this test is, that the balance is such that you're paying toward the principal portion and not the interest portion. That can be another reason to get less than a 25% target. It adds an unfortunate complication to this wrinkle, and I'm sorry for that. It just does. It just does. So it just means the calculation is a little more complicated than we'd like it to be. So when we're talking about MOPR, it is the monthly principal reduction, because we really only supplement the principal side, not the interest side. And we'll show you how to test that as we go through. So what we're going to do is walk through the steps of Mortgage E-Letter 2024-02. That is where, and this is also in the handbook now. Now, what is the point of this? Should be a question. Why are we doing all this math? Always good to know. I think understanding the math is important for two reasons. One, if the servicer does it wrong, you need to be able to understand how the system works so you can find out where the mistake was, or you can help figure out where the mistake is, or you can help understand for your borrower whether this makes sense at all. If they have no partial claim, you'll understand it. So I don't think you need to get this all right away, because the servicer is the one who's going to be making the offer. But in order to understand the environment, the situation, I think understanding a simple example is very important. I think there will be calculators. There will be things out there to help with this. But I do think it's really crucial from a problem solving and understanding point to at least be able to get this math somewhat. I think it's also just helpful in setting those client expectations. I think the more you understand how this works, the better. So you at least have this example, which is Actually, I actually made this one a little bit on the easier side because we don't have to deal with less partial claim. So bear with me. Let's walk through this. The first thing you knew, the main thing, the key thing, what you absolutely should do for people, you got to figure out if they have any partial claim availability. In this example, we have a ton of partial claim availability because this person's never had a partial claim before. You multiply 187.25, which is the unpaid principal balance at the time of the first partial claim, by 30%, you have $55,000 in partial claim. Now, though, that people are going to come in not knowing if they've had any partial claim or think they know they've had partial claim and not. So what do? I think you ask the servicer, have these people had any partial claim? I think the other thing you do is I do think it should become pretty routine to get in touch with the National Servicing Center at FHA, maybe even up front, maybe even have your borrower sign something early, just so you can simply call over there and say, does my borrower have any partial claim availability? This is a total trust but verify and really heavy on the verify. You can also check property records because these partial claims should have been recorded. I don't know. I think that's tricky, and that can be hard for some in some jurisdictions anyway. I think talk to your client, talk to the servicer, and talk to HUD, because it is really important to know, does this client have any partial claim availability? Because if they don't, this payment supplement part isn't going to help. So the first thing, partial claim availability. In our example, totally fine. 55,000 is a lot. The next step you do is you see what you need to reinstate the mortgage, because that's the first step, right? We got to first bring it current, and then we add extra partial claim to supplement. So we do the whole principal and interest payment here, because we are actually bringing this loan current from past due payments. So you're actually advancing the date. So we do count the principal part and the interest part. So the whole 11,000 plus 5,000 in escrow and fees, because we're saying all of that is recoverable. So the total amount you need to reinstate is 16,000. So you can see right now, 55,000 of availability, we're only taking 16,000 up to reinstate. So in this case, we do have some money. We kind of know this. We do intuitively have some money to spread out to supplement the payment. And that's the next step. What do we have left? So we have $39,000 left. $39,000 left, more or less, in order to apply to see if we can supplement. So we have the availability. We know we need to recover. We have some money left over. So let's calculate now the MOPR. What would be the contribution? So the first thing we do, what's a 25% reduction? Simple. You multiply 954 by 25% reduction. So you would get a $238 a month reduction. That's what a 25% reduction in payment would be. And over a 36-month period, that would require only $8,586. So you can see this is maybe going to work. Unfortunately, we don't just end the test at the 25% reduction. We have to compare. This is the part that is a little unnecessarily complicated, but necessary. So we have to know if we can use all of that 25% reduction, because if that 25% reduction cuts into interest, we can't use it all. But so we look at an amortization chart. Again, you're going to have to get used to an amortization calculator. We know that when we break down and we look at where this loan is, the first monthly payment has a principal amount of $351. So when you make a $954 payment, $351 goes to principal, the rest goes to interest. Therefore, we know we can use the entire 25% because there's more principal than that. The reduction is $238. The principal portion is $351. Because that's lower, we know we're good. I know that is some math that is no fun. It requires looking up amortization. Remember what this is for. This is just a test. This is a test on whether we can use the full 25%. The short version is if your borrower is a decent amount of the way into their loan, we know that when you make payments early, most of it goes to interest, and or a larger portion goes to interest and a smaller portion goes to principal, and that generally changes. So when you have a borrower who's been in their loan for a while, it's more likely that more of that is going to be for principal, and that's what we're checking here. And in this case, it is. So we know a 25% reduction, backing a step, would be $238.50. That's what we need for a 25% reduction. And we're checking, and we know, oh, okay, yeah, I mean, the principal portion is smaller, so we're fine. We can use the whole $238 a month. So then we see if we can get that payment relief from the amount we have left. In other words, does the borrower have enough partial claim available so they can have the full payment relief? And here, absolutely they do. That's what we were saying before. You can sort of just common sense this. They had 55,000. They only needed 16,000 to bring it current. They had a heck of a lot of partial claim available for payment relief. So yes, they can fit that whole 8,586 in, which is the 36-month of 25% payment, because they haven't used any of it. This is where it can get even more complicated, where there's not enough partial claim available to cover the amount of payment relief. Then it gets hard. But here, in this case, man, there's plenty. So we're good. We can move on to the next step. And then you would check the minimum. But again, we don't need to check the minimum in this case because we know that there's enough to cover the maximum, right? Remember, this minimum is, are we really going to go through all of this just to give you a few dollars of payment relief? Like, there needs to be enough available for this to actually make sense to go through all this. That's the minimum part. This is the 5%. So it's got to be some value. That does not apply in our case because we can get to 25%. This minimum is just in cases where it's not quite so obvious. There's a value to it. And then you compare to the loan modification offer, right? That's why we had to do that thing first. So what was the modification offer that we generated, and how does that compare with the payment supplement? It is a big difference. This is a very, very big difference. This is like, I know we went through a lot here and we had to do a lot of math, but man, this is big. The modification was going to increase these folks' payment by $32. That was going to be unsustainable. That was probably not going to help. The payment supplement doesn't just provide payment relief, it goes to $715 a month payment. That is huge. That is a huge, huge difference. So from a choice perspective, you generally offer them the lower. If the P&I is lower on the recovery mod, you offer the recovery mod. If it's lower on the payment supplement, you offer the payment supplement. But here you can see it's not even close. I mean, it's not even close. It is $270 difference between the two. That is massive for people. So after all of these steps, this borrower is not going to receive a bad payment modification. They're going to get, for 3 years, they're going to pay $715.50 a month, and the other portion is coming through the partial claim, meaning the partial claim is going to supplement the payment. They're only going to pay $17.50 a month for 3 years. That is going to give them 3 years to either get their finances back on, hope that rates go down if they need a different modification, or something else. It will go back to their former payment. That is going to be hard, and that is going to take housing counseling. It's going to take planning. You are going to play a crucial role in this. But I think it's a little easier to understand that the that the payment will return to the former payment rather than have a modification that goes up. And the rate doesn't change. You know, the rate stays at 4%. So it just, that is going to be a benefit that your clients are going to see. And the term is not going to 40 years. The term is going to be at 25 years because it actually advanced the term of the loan. And crucially, the borrower did not use all of their partial claim availability. So I think it's helpful to break it out this way. The modification, not only we've gone about the payment is super important, but the rate is 8%, and we know how clients feel about 40-year terms, that it's just going to be 40 years. In the payment supplement, sure, it's going to go back to 954, which was cheaper than the modification, but it also has the benefit of a 4% interest rate. It also has a benefit of a 300-month term, meaning 25 years, not 40. And in the first example, there is no partial claim remaining. In the second example, there's $30,000 of partial claim remaining, which will be there and available if the borrower falls behind again. So reach out to me for questions. We have been through a wild ride. We still have plenty of time to talk. And I know in my heart of hearts that this is really complicated stuff and that people are going to have questions. So Christy, I see you've popped up. Do you have one that you'd like to pick out, or should we just go through all of these? I will trust you to be our guide as the best thing.
Certainly. Thank you so much, Steve. It's been an informative presentation and really engaging for everyone. So I'll pick out questions from the Q&A box, and if anybody wants to email Steve their questions, we'll also include his email address in the chat box so that you can reach out to him and, get your questions answered personally. But yeah, I'll start really quickly. When evaluating the client's finances for VASP, will they take into consideration non-housing expenses or only housing-related expenses?
So on VASP, it should be an indication of can you afford or not. My understanding as of August 8th is that this is going to be streamlined, and it's going to involve whether the client indicates they can afford it. So the client is going to have to, so it's not going to affect the terms. It's more going to be about, is this affordable? But what I would say as you're housing counseling with someone, you got to think about this globally. If you say it's not affordable, there may be there is sort of a separate VA option, the traditional purchase, that could be available, but it is very unpredictable. You do not know what that would actually result in. So it would be a bit of a one hand versus two in the bush situation. Also, you have to take into account, where are they going to go? Are they going to rent? What are they going to pay for rent? The technical answer is, well, no, the borrower is just going to say whether they can afford it or not. The expenses aren't going to be factored in generating the offer, but you got to think very carefully then about what are the alternatives. Getting a better offer is a real crapshoot, and dealing with this rental market is a real crapshoot too. So I think you all have a really important role to play here. And I think getting people to look at, I think you're going to have something about other money management, other issues, how to generate more income or cut expenses. That's probably going to be the real key to this evaluation, and why you all play such an important role.
Thank you. And a follow-up question, if a homeowner is offered a modification that has an increase in the monthly payment that they cannot afford, can the homeowner decline the offer or request to be considered for VASP with the
That is a great question. I think There is actually a little bit of ambiguity on that, I think. You got to look really carefully at Appendix F, which I have a cite to. There is a step, but I would say if they can't afford it, I'm pretty sure they are going to tell the servicer in that case, I can't afford that, and then VASP. But what I would say is if you've got a situation like this, you're probably leading that conversation, meaning you're probably saying, before we're even getting, you're saying, is VASP available? Like, are you offering VASP now? Like, what is your timeline for offering VASP? When can we get this on? Because if you anticipate, and rightly, that the only thing you're going to get is something unaffordable, I think what you want to do in this next, 50 days, is kind of talk to the servicer about where they are in VASP, because you're anticipating this relief isn't going to help that you have now. And also, my understanding, you would say to them, is like, we're in a foreclosure moratorium, so can we just wait? So it's going to take some soft skills. I think it's going to take some getting in touch with the VA tech if you're in that situation. I think this is going to be a situation of engagement rather than clear, bright line answers.
Okay. Another question is, why are homeowners being pushed to refinance and increase a debt which is being funded through a quote unquote grant program? Aren't grants provided as means to not require repayment? This is an overall general question from an ethics viewpoint and take care of homeowners as the program was originally intended to.
Yeah, I think this is not a grant, is the way I would say it. This is a so VA has had the power to, I think this is important. So VA has had the power to purchase loans in default and put them on their books, I think, since the start of the program. It's been years. And so this is really just VASP is really VA's effort to formalize and increase it given this rate environment. So this is really about VA using a power they've had for the entire life of their loan to address what is a really challenging situation in this current rate environment. So that's how I would conceive of this. It's not a grant. It is just VA using their power to purchase loans that they've had for a very long time.
Okay. And have you seen Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac change their interest rates to the market rate for their modifications, or are they keeping it contractual rate, assuming that they meet all the servicing guidelines?
Great question. So rates increased about 2.5 years ago. Fannie and Freddie have allowed for that entire period, and through this, they allow borrowers to retain their interest rate and not go to an increased rate when there is a loan modification. Why this has to do with the difference in how Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are structured versus the difference in how FHA, VA, and USDA have been structured, which is outside of the scope of this. But we have not, so the fundamental part of this is that we have not seen the same challenges and problematic loan mod offers in the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac space that we have seen in FHA, VA, and USDA, because given the difference of how they are, Fannie and Freddie do not require payment or modifications to increase rates, whereas the FHA, VA, USDA, those are subject to Ginnie Mae pooling, so those go up to the market rate, which is why we have these programs and why I am here talking to you today. It's a good question. There is an important distinction between Fannie, Freddie on one side, VA, FHA, and USDA on the other.
And if beyond 60 months, can the client bring the delinquency down to 60 and then do a VASP?
Yeah, that is I think there is a practical problem with that. The practical problem is servicers not accepting payments when they are when they are accelerated. So so it could be challenging. I would say this. I would say if you are in such a boat, I would get the VA tech involved and see if you can try to broker this situation where the borrower pays the extra money at the same time, sort of like the challenges of coordinating VASP and HAF, I guess. So I'm not saying, I guess Ken is more of a practical problem that maybe you can resolve by working with the servicer and the VA tech. I think the other option in that case is I mentioned earlier, there is a unspecified, uncertain non-VASP purchase, the traditional VA purchase that isn't streamlined, that is also a VA purchase program, but we just don't have the same level of detail on it, and there's nothing really clear about it. I think you can ask about, they call it TVAP. I don't find that to be the greatest acronym, but it is what it is. Traditional VA purchase. You can always think about that option too. And you can start talking to the VA tech about that right now. And you can bring these up together. You can say, you know, maybe I'd like to try to bring the money in to bring this under 60 months. Can we work with a servicer on that? Or the other option is, can we consider this traditional VA purchase, or TVAP?
Thank you. Another question / clarification. I've heard VASP referred to as VA's personal version of partial claim. Could you clarify if there are any deferred payments or second liens, or if this is just a modification?
So it is not a partial. That is a great question. It is not a partial claim. It is a, though you would think it seems very close. A partial claim is where VA or any of these ones would pay a portion of an amount. A partial claim is on insurance or a portion of the guarantee, and then the servicer still holds that loan. There's a second mortgage to VA or HUD, and then but the ownership doesn't transfer. So this is not that. This is VA purchasing the entire loan from the servicer lender and putting it on their own books. And the real reason they're doing that is so that they don't have to be subject to the private market and the Ginnie Mae securities or PMMS or anything like that. They're bringing the whole thing on their own books. So it's actually in distinction to a partial claim. The partial claim situation is where the servicer stays owning it, VA pays a portion of it and holds a second mortgage. This is VA's buying the first mortgage and putting it on their own books.
Thank you. And if the present waterfall results in a denial, then they will hold the application until, sorry, this is more of a comment.
Yeah, no, I hope so. Okay. Oh, I see. This is back into another. So I would hope if the president. So this might be for M&T said this morning, and I would hope this would be for others. Like, there is a moratorium. You would say, this is just a bad offer. Where is VASP coming in? How does VASP get? Some of the servicers might proactively be doing this already, where they're holding off and they're waiting on VASP to come online. That would be great. But if, in other cases, I think you want to talk to the servicer about, like, when is your VASP going to come in? And I do think getting the VA tech involved in that sort of situation is really an important step.
Okay. And Phyllis will follow up with you via email about the language that you can share for your event. This is more of a question. My client is only 2 months behind. She's going to lose 30% of her income soon. She will no longer be able to afford her house payment. Can they be asked to extend 40 years?
So again, the key is knowing what the key in that case is knowing who the investor is, and knowing what's available. And your servicer should know. I mean, the servicer should know what the rules are. And there's imminent default happening, but with a client like that, where we're having some sort of they're still early behind, they're trying to get on board, you might consider forbearance, but then also talking to the client about when is the appropriate, that still applies no matter what. Talking to the client about when the appropriate time to get the loss mitigation offer, that's the bread and butter things that you all have to do all the time. Like, when does it make sense to reach an agreement with your servicer on how you're going to bring your loan current? Do you need to be on forbearance first for a little bit longer to figure out your situation before you're actually ready to go, right? That is all still part of it. And that figures in, like, how much the pressure of foreclosure, can you get on forbearance? Who's your investor? You don't want to get in a situation where you agree to something and then immediately it doesn't take. Do you need to get on forbearance? Do you need to see where this person's going to be in their finances before you make that call? Those are the things that are really tricky, and why housing counselors are so important, why your jobs are so important, is kind of helping people understand where what their situation is going to be, and sometimes giving them tough love about, okay, well, what kind of other income are you going to bring in? The things that you all do all the time really applies here. These are the rules that are available and the options that are available, but the counseling piece is, of course, really critical.
Next question. The partial claim limit is based on the principal balance of the loan at the time of the first partial claim is received, right?
That is correct. And so want to build on that very good and important question. So that is how you figure out the maximum. So I went through a really challenging in other aspects. Some of the parts of it were easy. This person had never had a partial claim before. You knew what to calculate. What gets tricky is with the previous ones. So you're now, and they had a partial claim 5 years ago, which you know about. And what you have to do is go back to the principal balance at the time of that first partial claim. That first partial claim principal balance is what sets the 30% cap. That's where you start calculating 30%. But of course, it's a cap, so you have to take out the partial claim that they took out. So if they were at $200,000 balance, then you multiply 30% by 200,000, that's the amount. But if they got a $10,000 partial claim, of course that has to count against the cap. So you subtract that 10,000 out to where you are now. So it is really both understanding when that first partial claim was, how much what the principal balance was, then you really do have to know how many partial claims they've had, and you have to factor those in there.
And should they ask for the partial claim as well as a supplemental payment?
So that is going to be, so for payment supplement, remember, it's probably not going to start being offered until January 1st. That's the key. I mean, servicers can start offering it sooner. I don't expect that a lot of servicers are going to offer it sooner. So probably, I mean, you can ask, but it's probably January 1st. Whether to ask for the supplement is also really going to be up to the borrower. If the borrower is saying, no, I really just need to get recovered, I don't need to take out more of a partial claim, well, then that makes sense. I mean, you should really push back and make sure they're doing that. They know that that's really what they want. But for many people, that will be the case. They have recovered. They had a distinct amount. They're back on track. They want to preserve as much partial claim as they can for the future. They may be in a good spot to do that. It's those borrowers who need payment relief where the payment supplement is going to come in. And for many, I don't expect mortgage interest rates. They might be lower, but are they going to be 3%? Probably not by the beginning of the year. And a lot of our borrowers have 3.5% interest rates. So for those borrowers who need payment relief, you are going to be looking at the partial claim. Now, the servicer is going to walk through the modification analysis first, right? And see if a modification is going to provide a lower payment. But frankly, that is, for most people, that's going to be pretty unlikely, because just in the example, the increase in interest rate is going to make it so you ain't going to get payment relief through a modification. So in that case, yeah, I mean, you're going to think about a payment supplement for the borrower who needs relief. But the key is really going to be then saying, okay, you've been approved for payment supplement. You're going to get, in many cases, a 25% reduction. That's only going to be for 3 years. So what are you going to do in the next 3 years from a planning perspective to get yourself where you can pay the payment that you had in? That's what I like about it. It is the payment that they agreed to. So it's kind of like, what are you going to do for these 3 years to get yourself back on track? You're making payments. You're not getting farther behind, right? You're not spending 3 years and just digging yourself further in the hole. You are bringing on more partial claim debt, but it's at 0%. So it's not the worst, but you do want to know, like, what are you gonna do in order to get back to the payment in 3 years?
Okay. And will the payment supplement allow the partial claim amount to exceed the original 30% of the balance max limit? Okay.
No, that is the really hard situation. The really hard situation is if those people have maxed out on their partial claim, the payments, if people have maxed out on their partial claim, it's not for them. The question about it is it like, are you behind 30%, can't take advantage? I think it's just a little more complicated than that. You really just have to go through and first figure out what the unpaid principal balance is, multiply it by 0.3, compare all of these. So it's not as simple as if they're behind 30%, they can't do it because, yeah, I mean, maybe it's the case, but I would walk through the math just a little bit more to make sure, figuring out because it's important to figure out the arrears and understand where all that is anyway. So you really want to just walk through those early steps.
Okay. And have you heard of any plans for HUD/FHA to increase the partial claim amount from 30% of the outstanding balance of the FHA mortgage?
It's statutory, meaning that the 30% cap is built into the actual statute that established the partial claim. So you would need like an act of Congress to do that. I haven't heard a lot of call for that to happen. So I would say we're probably at a 30% statutory cap for the time being.
Okay. And I'll include one last question and then I'll pass it over to my colleague Ebony. She has some announcements. So any questions that aren't able to get answered, we'll share them with Steve via email, and we'll connect you with him as well. The last question, is there a worksheet that we can use to do these calculations?
Okay. I think there are people working on worksheets. I will go back to it. I am not the person who does worksheets. I try to do these things out. So keep looking. I think there will be. I think HUD does have something on their website as well. So I will make sure that the good folks at NHRC are aware of any worksheet that I think is there. I think there may be some, but I haven't tested them out yet. So I think those will be coming.
Okay. Thank you so much, Steve. We really appreciate you taking the time to answer these questions and sharing all these updates. It's really helped. And I'll pass it over to my colleague, Ebony.
Thanks,
Hi,
everyone. It was my
everyone.
pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much, Steve. We appreciate you coming and sharing your knowledge and expertise today. And I did make a copy of all of the questions, just in case there was something that you did not have an opportunity to answer. And if you don't mind, I can send them to you via email. And that way you can respond, and I will get those all out to everyone and send them out with a copy of this recording. Is that all right? All right, thank you again so much, Steve. And thank you everyone for joining us for our webinar today. We do, before we go really quickly, want to invite you all to join NHRC to take advantage of some of our, all of our member benefits, the 45% discount using this Savvy online student loan support, 25% on all tri-merged credit reports, the 20% discount on all Money Habitudes products, and the 11% discount on the Big Language Solutions telephone translation service. So if you want to take advantage of these benefits and you're not already a member of NHRC, please do so. You can visit our website. I do believe also that the link to join NHRC has been added to the chat box. And then don't forget to also join us for all of our upcoming Leaders in Housing Counseling webinars. All right. Well, that's it for us today. We appreciate you all again for joining us for our webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to email any of our staff members. We'll be able to help you with any questions that you may have. Again, thank you so much for joining us.